Isaac and Rebekah. Yeah. I think everybody's sitting at home in shock that it's rained as much as it has, but it's good to be here today. As we begin, I'd like to ask Bernie if he would lead us in a word of prayer.
Very thankful for the time that you allowed us to come together this morning. It's profitable that we study your word, that we've gleaned much from it, learn more about you and teach it. Father, we're aware of the sickness, Father, that we have. We know that you know their every need. We know that you know every one of them. We ask you to bless them, heal them, be your almighty will. Father, we thank you for the rain that we got during the night. We ask you to bless us more.
Last week, talking about Abraham, it was brought up in class about the call of Abraham. When did he get the call? And was it in Haran? Was it in Ur? And back and forth it kind of went, because it's worded in such a way in Genesis, it's a little vague, but it does say he had called him. But I've always said, and I didn't think about this, it's good to go over to the New Testament to look at some of the sermons that are there, because they really give you a summary of Old Testament history. And a few days ago, Brother Mark pointed out to me, he said, go over to Stephen's sermon. And I said, I should have done it. But anyway, Acts chapter 7, Stephen gives us the answer there. And he's given his speech, Acts 7 and verse 2. He said, brethren and fathers, listen. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran. So that would be back in Ur, before he was in Haran. And said to him, get out of your country, from your relatives, and come to a land that I will show you. Then he came out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Haran. And from there, when his father was dead, he moved him to this land in which you now dwell. So they did, he was called, they left Ur, when it was about 700 miles to Haran. And at that point, they settled down for a while till his father died. And then he goes on even further to the land of Canaan. So that answers it there. But if you go over to his sermon, like Paul's sermon, go back to Peter's sermon, you'll get some answers on some Old Testament history. It kind of fits the pieces together. And of course, Stephen, speaking through inspiration here, saying the things that he did. Any comments on that? I appreciate that. You have to look at not just one passage, but put all the passages together. And we usually say the Old Testament can help you understand the New Testament. In this case, the New Testament helps you to understand the Old Testament. So let's, in lesson number 4, Isaac and Rebekah. Abraham, Sarah were old, and they had a child. In fact, how old was Sarah when Isaac was born? Anyone remember? 90 years old. You don't expect to become a first-time mom or a last-time mom or whatever at 90 years of age, but you see God's hand in all this. But then she died, and she was 127 at the time that she died, and so that would put Isaac at 37 at the time of her death. And then by the time we get to this point, you're looking at him, we're looking at our lesson about 40 years of age or whatever. But it's time for Isaac. He has not been married. It's time for him to get a wife. He's supposed to have children and have nations come through him, and so it's time for him to get married along the way. Any thoughts before we get into the lesson? Abraham is involved in looking for a wife for Isaac. Parents may put input in today, and some more than others, but I would have probably discounted a lot of, if my parents had told me, here's who I want you to date or whatever. It's one thing to say this is a type of person, but if they start pointing out people, you might tend to get a little defensive these days. But Abraham was concerned because he knew the promises that were made through him, through Isaac as well, and he needed to find the appropriate person for him to marry. And in chapter 24, I got to get back to those, beginning in verse 2. Well, let's see, verse 1. Let's go back to verse 1. Genesis 24, verse 1. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. So Abraham said to the oldest servant of his house, who ruled over all that he had. Here's a person that he truly trusted, kind of like when Joseph was there in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar had him over all things. He was a trusted person. Here in this case, it's one that's older, wiser, trusted. And he said, please put your hand under my thigh. And that's a Old Testament type of thing, that it's a very solemn vow that you're making, a strong commitment. And, it's something very unusual sounding, but it's something that was just kind of showing this is serious and you are committing to this. And he said, I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. But you shall go to my country and to my family and take a wife for my son Isaac. And why would he be so concerned about going back to where his family was to get a wife for Isaac? Why not marry the Canaanites? Idol worship? Okay. Yeah, you had, that's the thing. Yeah, you do have idol worship back with the home folks too, but the Canaanites had given themselves completely over to it, and you do see when God called Abraham, he was ready, willing, and able to go. He went. He went for a little ways till his father died, and perhaps that I think he needed that because his father, kind of as the patriarch over all of them, kind of ruled the roost. And once he died, then Abraham could kind of go his own way more so. But at the same time, it is his people. We don't think about going. You don't go to a family reunion to find someone to marry these days. That would be frowned upon. But it's different times. And God told later, when you have the Israelites, when they went into the promised land, they were told, don't intermarry with them. They'll lead your heart away from God. And that's what said. They were idolaters through and through. And perhaps he could see something in those people that just wasn't right. And plus, he understood this is a lineage that the promises are coming through. But he felt much better about going back to the home folks and getting a wife from his own family. And he said, look, you go. You find someone that's suitable. Evidently, you look around in the land of Canaan, there weren't a lot of suitable choices from a godly perspective. And the servant's concerned because he said, I'm going back all this way, and it's a long way back. And he said, you want me to get someone? What if she won't come with me? Must I take your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham said, beware that you do not take my son back there. The Lord God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my family, who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, to your descendants I give this land, he will send his angel before you. You shall take a wife for my son from there. So he said, God's got this handled. It's going to be okay. You'll find the right person. And I think you see God's hand in this. How much he had told Abraham, I don't know, but he did tell him enough. And so you see another picture of why he did what he did. God had been speaking to him, and he just said, look, he's going to send an angel before you, and he's going to take care of this. And if the woman's not willing to follow you, you'll be released from this oath. Do not take my son back there. So he doesn't want his son to go back. And if she won't follow you, so the servant swore and promised that he would do that. And he took 10 camels, departed, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. And so you got camels, and I haven't ever watered a camel, but I understand if you water them, it takes quite a bit of water to fill up a camel. And so if he had 10 camels with him, that's a lot of water. And so they're kneeling down by the well, and the women went out to draw water, and he prays to God, give me success in all this, that I'll be able to find Isaac a wife. And he just said, look, as they come out, now let it be that the young woman to whom I say, please let down your pitcher that I may drink. And she says, drink, and I'll also give your camels a drink. Let her be the one you appointed to your servant Isaac. Here's a stranger coming into town. You say, look, I'll give you some water, but I'll also water all your camels as well. That would be an unusual statement. You wouldn't expect that. They might say, well, I'll draw you some water since you don't have anything to draw, but your camels are on your own. But it happened just as he said. Rebekah was the one who did that, and she was a young woman, very beautiful to behold, a virgin. No man had known her. She went down to the well, filled her pitcher, and came up, and he said, please, he ran to her and asked for some water, and she said, drink, my Lord. And then she said, I'll draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. That's, I'll fill them up. So that's just, again, I think an unusual statement there. Maybe shows her attitude, but also I think it's pointing out to the servant that this is the right one. And so he begins to ask about her. They find out who she is, and she's willing to go. I mean, some of her family wants her to stay a little bit longer, but they leave rather quickly. Any comments up to this point or questions? You get on down to verse 61 is where our text picks up. Let me make sure I didn't miss something here. In verse 61, Rebekah and her maids arose. They rode on the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. They had a long journey ahead of them. But she departed. She said farewell to her family. They blessed her and hoped that she would have many children. And, kind of a sad thing, because I realized that she would leave and they'd probably never see her again. But at the same time, they knew that she would be marrying someone they was sure was a good man as well. And so they depart. And so Isaac is out in the field meditating. What do you suppose he was meditating on? Doesn't say, but if you were Isaac, what would you be thinking? I wonder if my wife's coming soon. It's not quite a mail order bride, but still, they're going out and picking you out a bride and coming back with her. And I imagine there's a lot of things to think about. Of course, we should spend time in meditation on the Word of God, our relationship to God, time in prayer as well. But here's Isaac meditating in the evening, and he looks, and here's the camels coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes. When she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel, and she said, who is this man walking in the field to meet us? The servant said, it's my master. So she took a veil and covered herself. She did what would be considered the modest thing to do back in that day and age for a young virgin girl or woman. And, I guess, the servant is just a servant, so that would be a little different circumstance. But here it was, the man she's supposed to marry, and she followed what would be considered a modest introduction to the man that she was going to marry, according to the customs of the time. I mean, she was doing what was appropriate and what was considered modest at that time. And so she covers herself. And so the servant goes and tells Isaac everything that happened. I mean, he can tell all about how it was pointed out to him the right person to take, and all the things that he had done. So Isaac is not rebellious at all of that. He accepts her as his wife, and she him as her husband. And he brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. I mean, it wasn't just a marriage of convenience. He truly loved her, it says, and was comforted after his mother's death. I mean, here's a young man that's grown up, probably very close to his mother, and love, a mother and son's love for one another displayed here. But here's a different situation now. He had lost his mother, and it was just him and his father and the servants that were there. But now he has an opportunity to have a wife and receive comfort there. Any thoughts? You go on down to Genesis 25. And the story picks back up once again. And it says, Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padanaram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. So here's kind of some family ties there. 40 years old, he marries her. Now, Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. It sounds like it was just kind of a bam thing there as far as, they get married, went a while, didn't have a child. He prays for her to have a child. But about how long was it? Let's see, I'm making sure about this. It doesn't down here. Verse 26, afterward his brother came, the time when the children were born, Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. 40 years old when he got married, 60 years old when the children were born. So, 20 years had passed. That's a long time when you're 40 years of age, going to 60. I mean, you think about Sarah as old as she was, and not quite as old, but still some similarities there. But they'd gone 20 years without a child. And so Isaac is pleading with the Lord for his wife. Do what? Yeah, I mean, as far as the time of having children, I don't. Now with Sarah, it says she was, that she was past. I mean, she would be. How old was Rebekah? I mean, he was 40, and then 60. How old was Rebekah? Do what? Well, yeah, but I mean, I still couldn't. I'm thinking about being, you become a first-time father at 60. I know my brother-in-law said he got married later, and he said, I just started off being a grandparent rather than a parent. I had children, and said, but his daughter has turned out well. But anyway, still, you think you're wanting to have children. God, he knows the promises of God, just like Abraham did. Abraham knew that God had promised a son. He tried to take it into his own hands. He and Sarah did, and wound up with some interesting results as far as Ishmael is concerned. First of all, thinking it was going to be through his servant, and then trying to do it with have a child, and the promises to fulfill that through a handmaiden of Sarah. And then finally God said, look, it's Sarah and you. And so, and now Isaac, he knows the promises too. I mean, God emphasized them not only to Abraham, but to Isaac, and I'm sure he knew full well what was going on. But now he's pleading with the Lord because it's been 20 years. He's 60 years, well, probably about 59 if he's 60 when they're born. And the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. So she's, I'm sure, ecstatic that she's expecting a child. But the children struggled together within her. And she said, look, if all's well, why am I like this? You get pregnant, able to have a child, and then you realize things aren't going just right. This isn't the way I've heard it's supposed to be. Now, they may not have known as much back then as we would now, but still, she just said, something's not quite right here. And so she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. So I've got twins, and I don't know how common twins were back in that day and age. First mention of them, I think, in the scripture here. But, that changes things. They, even today, doctors watch you a little closer if you have twins or triplets or whatever it may be. But she realized, I'm not just having one child, I'm having 2 children. But then he said, look, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. And so God says, this is the way it's going to play out. And I don't know how much she put into that. My mind would probably stop at, I'm having a twin. I'm having twins. And so she's hearing that there are two children within her, and they will be born, because he's telling what's going to happen. So, you can get out of that. You're going to make it through your pregnancy, and you're going to have the children, and then her days are fulfilled. And indeed, there were twins in her womb. No surprise. When God says it's going to be that way, it's going to be that way. And here you are having your children. The first one comes out red. He was like a hairy garment all over. So they called his name Esau. So your first, what do you think that mama said when she saw him? You think she said, ooh, or what a beautiful son, you know? I, you know, um, I've always, any baby to me is a beautiful thing. And I was working in the congregation one time, and the minister, I was youth minister, but the minister there, he made a mistake. The word got out that he said he had, all babies were ugly to him when they was born. And about right after that, there's about 12 babies born at the church. And he'd go up and say, oh, wow, what a baby. You know, and they go, and the word got out, and they go, we know what you mean. You know, he's ugly. But anyway, you know, that's your child. The main thing is you count fingers, toes, and healthy. But just the way he's described here, it just shows the contrast between the two children completely. From the moment of, you know, really before they were born, they're fighting each other. And then at birth, one comes out like a hairy garment over, just hair all over it, and red as could be. Afterward, his brother came out. And then his hand takes hold of Esau's heel. Well, they named him Esau. And so his name was called Jacob. I mean, you know, he grabs hold, he's once called usurp or grab hold of. I mean, you know, the names meant something back then. But he grabbed hold of Esau's, I don't know, I'm running slow, out of his heel, and Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. Okay, so the birth. They're born, they're fine, but just you see something going on here. The first, hairy, the other one, you know, one was more like the outdoorsman type. One's more of a, I guess you might say, a mama's type boy. One stayed around the home, the other went out and hunted. Just different. And that's fine. You know, every child is different. If you've had more than one child, you'd realize every child's different. Doesn't mean it's bad. You just have to handle different ones in different ways, and different ones have different interests and different personalities, and that's the case here. But you see some things within them as far as character is concerned as well. Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field. Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. So again, different personalities, different interests, and a place for both of them, really. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And, you know, Jacob was there cooking as well. What's wrong with that picture? Favoritism? Partiality? Yeah, I mean, you know, we get accused of that sometimes within our family, of playing favorites. And I said, no, you just have to handle different ones in different ways. And I said, we love all of you. And I think they know that deep down. They should anyway. But, you know, you see so many times that parents play favorites because they have the same interests that that child does, or that child has the same interests they do. And or maybe they're more successful, you know, oh, my child makes straight A's or whatever. It's going to a prestigious university. Or this child is the star athlete, you know, or whatever. And they gravitate toward that one, and the others get jealous. I mean, you look at Joseph, his coat of many colors. You look at the dreams that he had and the way that played out. It didn't go well. It ended well with Joseph. And in this situation, though you have two favorites by two different ones. I mean, you have one that's a favorite to his dad, one's a favorite to his mom. So I guess they're both getting attention, but you look at how it all plays out as well. Isaac loved to eat the game that his son would bring in. And Jacob, one day, he was at home. He was cooking some stew up. Esau came in from the field. He had been out hunting, and he was tired. He was hungry. It just says he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary. He said, look, you know, I am just so tired. I need something to eat. And boy, that smells good. That looks good. Give me some of that stew so that I can eat it. And therefore, his name was called Edom, which, you know, talking about red. Jacob said, sell me your birthright as of this day. Why would Jacob do such a thing? Why do you think I mean, it's one thing to say, boy, if you do my chores the next 10 days or whatever, or the next week, or if you will just pay me a certain amount of money, but sell me your birthright. Now, the oldest child got that double portion, had the greater blessing placed upon them, and there's certain things that came from being the firstborn, getting the birthright. And so for him to say, look, for this cup of stew, give me your birthright. Why would he do that? Probably been thinking about, okay, looking for opportunities. And he just finally says, here's the opportunity to act on it. Okay, what else? You think he knew a little bit about Esau? I mean, Esau was impulsive, thinking about the moment. He's not thinking about consequences. People get themselves in a lot of trouble when they think just for the moment, boy, I need this or I want that, and then all of a sudden the consequences come in. Somebody does something they shouldn't do and they get caught. And here, he knew Esau, that, boy, all he has on his mind is he's hungry. I can get anything I want out of him right now because he's hungry. So he knew something about the personality of Esau. Evidently, he was a good hunter, but he was impulsive in some of his decision-making, not thinking about the big picture and how this is going to affect me or my family. But also, what does it tell us a little bit about Jacob as well? A little sneaky, take advantage. But you do see God, I think still under it all, you see God's hand, and it's not forcing somebody to do something, but it is working out to the way that the younger brother is going to be the one who gets the birthright, who gets the greater blessing, and the one that the promise is going to go through rather than through Esau. I mean, really, he is the more acceptable of the two sons for God's plan. But you do see those total different personalities. Jacob may have been one that stayed around the house, but he was a smart man, and he knew how to get what he wanted in this way. Because Esau said, look, I'm about to die. What's this birthright to me? I don't care about birthrights. That's something for way off down in the future. I'm not concerned with that right now. I'm hungry right now. And if I don't eat something, I'm going to die. Well, Jacob wanted to make sure that it was ironclad. He said, swear to me as of this day. Let's make it official. He swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Do you think he really, as we think about the word despise, do you think he hated his birthright? He turned away from it? Okay. He didn't value the significance of it, the value of it. He placed greater value in the moment that bowl of stew would be much more important to him than a birthright. If he had sat down and thought about it and really thought about it, he'd say, this is crazy. I mean, I can get me something to eat. I don't have to have a bowl of stew right now, or I can offer him some money for the stew, or go cook my own stew. I can make it that long. The birthright's more important. But he despised it in the sense that he didn't really value it. And, you look at characters in the Bible, some of them really did what was appropriate in certain situations, but he did not. They should have really appreciated it. We think about that eldest son getting the greater blessing, but there was a greater responsibility placed on that eldest son as well, as far as the estate, as far as the family and taking care of those things. And Esau really wasn't really a good person for taking care of that, but it's taken care of here. I mean, he sold it. He despised it. How can we do that today? I'm not talking about like getting a birthright. I think most people try to treat their children fairly and equally. I mean, in what we think of fair and equal today, as far as estates are concerned, and make sure everybody gets what they not necessarily deserve, but what's appropriate as far as to give them. But how can we despise our birthright, our citizenships in heaven, home with God in heaven? What are ways we can despise it? And I'm not asking for a confession here, so I'm just saying in general. Not living a life what? Not living the life that we should. We live it the way we want to because that's most pleasure. How can we despise our birthright as Christians today? Not the birthright in the sense of physical possessions, but we think about our inheritances in heaven. How can we despise that?
You despise spiritual birthright, you messed up. You're
Yeah, I mean, just like with no, right. But just like with Esau, he despised it and he messed up from a physical standpoint, and also as far as the lineage standpoint's concerned.
verse 23.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, God said this is what's going to happen, and it does work out. But you look at the different characters involved in it working out. Esau didn't appreciate the importance of the birthright and what went with it. Jacob wanted it, and he took advantage of his brother and what he did. But still, everything's working out in a way that God says, look, it's going to be the younger that's going to be the one that's going to be in charge. And God works through Jacob. You know, he can take imperfect people and do great things through them. And we see that we've noticed some of the shortcomings of Abraham. Now we can see some with coming on down to Jacob and Esau. But ultimately, it's working out the way that God had promised that it would. The older shall serve the younger. And so as this unfolded and he got the birthright from him, Esau's happy because he ate the food, but then he realized what had happened. And you get down to chapter 20. Let me get over here. I'm reading in one place, trying to turn in the other. Do what? Do what? Okay. Yeah. If we live for here and now, you know, if it's more important to us what our friends think or what our boss at work may think, if it's more important to us my pleasure and the things I want, and you know, I want my way or my pleasure, rather than what's pleasing to God, really we are despising the birthright. I mean, you know, we need to be careful because we can do the same thing he did. We live, you know, we you know, people lie, cheat, and steal. What was that? Was it out in Oregon? Where was it? The police chief? Can't remember who. He just said, well, you know, when people shoplift and steal, or maybe it's Chicago, maybe they're hungry. You know, it's okay if they do those crimes. Maybe they're hungry. And I'm thinking there's programs there to feed people. We can excuse any crime. People try to excuse any crime for just saying, well, maybe they're, you know, it's the way they were raised. Maybe it's society against them. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they're this. And we lose sight of what's really right and wrong. And we can become like Esau as well. But after he sold the birthright, well, it came down time for Isaac to die, and Jacob and Esau. You know, you're supposed to be having a blessing given, and for some reason I'm having trouble keeping my place this morning, so please excuse me. You know, Jacob blessed them, and the blessings were important. I mean, you think about prophecies given, or you know, with we go back to Joseph and some, you know, when Jacob died, we'll go ahead to him, and then in this case as well, there were blessings that were given that could not be taken back, and with Esau, he realized, you know, he had sold his birthright, and then you have Jacob, and we're running out of time. You have Jacob coming in, and his father's old. He wants his son to cook him another meal. You know, go out and hunt and get something and cook it for me, and let me have this meal. And then he wanted the meal before he blessed him. Well, what did the mother do? Rebekah called Isaac in and Jacob in and told him that it'll be okay. You go to Genesis 27 is where I was trying to get to a minute ago, and about verse 11. Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, look, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man. I'm a smooth-skinned man. How can I go in? She wanted him to pretend to be Esau, and how can I do that? He can fool me and tell that I'm not the other son, and I'll be a deceiver to him. Well, he was being a deceiver, really. But then he said, I'll get a curse and not a blessing. To show how rough and tough of a fellow Esau was, his mother, first of all, said, let the curse be on me. And she took some of Esau's clothes, put him on Jacob, and then put skins of the kids of the goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. So she, rough goat skin or hair on him, and so that he would smell like, feel like his brother, because Isaac's sight was not good. And she cooked up some food for him to take to his father. And he went into my father said, he said, my father, and he goes, here am I. Who are you, my son? He said, I'm Esau, your firstborn. I've done just as you told me. Please arise, sit and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, because the Lord your God brought it to me. I mean, you're treading on some thin ice there to me. I mean, you're bringing God into this, saying, God gave me the game. But again, you see the deceit going on this, and trying to get the blessing for him. Again, God said this is the way it's going to be, and so he said, "Come near, that I may feel you, my son, whether you're really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac, and he felt him. Said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him because the hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands, and so he blessed him. And then he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" And he said, "I am." He said, "Bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's game, so that my soul may bless you." So he brought it near to him. He ate. He brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near now and kiss me, my son." He came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him and said, "Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed." Because again, he had those animal skins on him. He had his brother's clothes on him. And therefore may God give you of the dew of the heavens, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren. Let your mother's house bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you. And when he finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac, his father, Esau came in from hunting. And he'd made savory food. He brought it to his father and said to his father, "Let my father arise, eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me." And of course, the father said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm your son, your firstborn Isaac." Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, "Who? Where is the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came. I have blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed." I gave the blessing to him, and you can't undo this. He'll be blessed. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceeding great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, my father, also, O my father." But he said, "Your brother came in with deceit and has taken away your blessing." And Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now look, he has taken away my blessing." Did he really take away his birthright? He sold it. He gave it away, didn't he? So he's blaming Jacob when really he has a part to play in all this as well. And he said, "Don't you have a blessing from me?" And so he said, "Indeed, I have made him your master, and all his brethren I have given to him as servants. With grain, wine, I sustain him. What shall I do now for you, my son?" He said, "Do you only have one blessing? Bless me also, my father." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And he said, "Behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. It shall come to pass when you become restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck." And it says, so Esau, and this picks back up in the book here. So Esau hated his brother Jacob because the blessing with which his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." Well, Rebekah found out, and she sends Jacob away back to the family once again to hide out there for a while. And so, eventually Jacob does come back, and Esau does not kill him. But you see a kind of an interesting thing play out between the siblings. We talk about sibling rivalry that went above it, but you see God's hand in it. You see God's hand as far as Abraham and Sarah having a child, Isaac and Rebekah having 2 sons, and then the younger one, the plans God had for the younger one, you see that playing out You see different personalities at play, but ultimately there's a line, there's a lineage that is forming here as far as through Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob. And who does Jacob become? Israel. And so then we have the children of Israel. Any thoughts or comments? I rambled a little bit today. You try to get everything in and not get too distracted on it as well, because there's a lot of little side roads you can go and talk about and different things. But ultimately, I mean, you see maybe some imperfect people, to say the least, but God using them and molding them into what they should be and helping them to lead in the right way. Any other thoughts? Okay. 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 I mean, to say it wasn't just impetuousness. It was. I should have brought that. I mean, he was just if the Bible says he was that, he was that. I mean, he was loose with his morals, to say the least. And so, for God's plan, who fit more into that mold? It would be Jacob. And again, he was being pushed by his mother in that as well. And I mean, the love that she had for her son, to turn around and deceive her husband, and then to do the thing. I mean, there's some deception in there, but God's hand into forming his people and choosing the right ones along the way to do that. He chose the one who really had probably the better character of the two. But again, God can use people of all sorts. But you do see Jacob later will become Israel. We get them down into Egyptian bondage, and then we'll have Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. Look at some siblings there, two brothers and a sister in next week's lesson.
Even with good people, Jacob did have.
Oh yeah, we can get forgiveness, but sometimes even with